Quarterback is the most important position in all of sports. A great quarterback can elevate a terrible roster into being Super Bowl contenders. We're not going to be talking about great quarterbacks today. No, we're going the other direction. We are going to go over the 10 worst starting quarterbacks ahead of the 2024 NFL season. Now, admittedly, some of these are prone to change, whether that be due to injury or the guys playing so badly they get benched. But we're rolling with who we think are going to be the week 1 starters for their respective teams. And at number 10 for the Seattle Seahawks, I've got Geno Smith. And this is not a criticism of Geno Smith per se. I think he is a fairly mediocre quarterback, middle of the pack. I just don't think he's going to be in a system which maximizes his many talents this year. He's going to be behind a bad offensive line. He's got an offensive coordinator who has only had experience in college. His receivers, while very talented, specialize in getting open deep, with the exception of Tyler Lockett, who keeps getting older and older, and they're going to be running the ball more. I think these things are going to take away from his production, which was already somewhat limited compared to 2022, and have him being the 10th worst quarterback in the NFL next year. Granted, 10th worst in a league of 32 teams, it's not bad still. It is absolutely mediocre, slightly below average, but it's where we're at.
I think it's kind of ludicrous to have him as the 10th worst, or in the other case, the 23rd best quarterback in the NFL. For me, Geno Smith isn't really close to that. I think he firmly and comfortably falls in that 19, 18, 20th best quarterback in the NFL. If we're going worst, he's more towards 13 or 14th worst in the NFL. He wins. He's a very accurate quarterback. He wins from the pocket at a high level. He's not overly mobile and doesn't have the greatest offensive line in the world in front of him, but he has a very solid backfield behind him. He has elite receiving weapons to throw to, and I think the production is going to be very solid this season. The Seahawks will be right in the middle of things as long as their new head coaching situation gets that defense to function at a different level. So I don't really see an argument for him being
you just said you could see him as being the 20th worst, and you're getting upset and putting him at 23. He was freakishly accurate in the Dave Canales system. Under Shane Waldron, when it was just Shane Waldron running things last year, he was average. He threw about 64% completion percentage. Can't move outside the pocket, doesn't have time to set up deep throws. I don't think he's going to be that good next year. Again, I'm not going to act like, oh, he's a terrible quarterback. He's the 10th worst. He's just kind of Like, you can win with Geno Smith. You're not going to lose games because of him.
Yeah, and I think because of those things, there's no way you can put him in the bottom 10 quarterbacks in the NFL.
But
that's just my opinion.
Who's your 10th worst?
My 10th worst, and this is going to come off to most people as probably way too high, as in I'm ranking them way too good. I have the Raiders quarterback situation. Whether it be Aiden O'Connell or Gardner Minshew, I think people are overhating who the Raiders passer is going to be next season. Presumably, I think a lot of people are on the train that it's going to be Aiden O'Connell because he has experience in the Raiders offense. It seems like the locker room is a big fan of his. And when you take a look at how he performed over the last 4 games of the season for the Raiders, he won 3 games, threw 0 interceptions, through 8 passing touchdowns. And as the season went on, we saw him get better throughout the year. And when you take a look at the Raiders offense and how it's kind of been transformed, they added Brock Bowers. You hope the offensive line will be better. A lot of people are going to talk about how Zamir White is their starting running back and they don't believe in him. But he was the most efficient running back on their roster last year, was productive in the attempts he did have, and now that he's going to have more of them, I think he can do enough to step up to the plate and be very good for them next season. And if it's Gardner Minshew, we all know what Gardner Minshew is. He's not the most athletic quarterback in the NFL. He's not an overly special talent, but he raises your team's floor significantly. I think that's very similar to Aiden O'Connell. 59 career touchdowns and 24 career interceptions, and I have faith in the Raiders quarterback situation to win them games next year.
Well, you should. There's a lot wrong with what you just said. I'll get into it as we go deeper into the list. It is going to be Aiden O'Connell starting week 1. Gardner Minshew historically does not win quarterback battles in training camp. Lost out to Trevor Lawrence as a rookie. Lost out to Anthony Richardson as a rookie, shockingly enough, last season. Had to step in and play, but he does not win games in camp, and I'll get into why that is later. Also, Zamir White's efficiency is going to fall off a cliff. He has to carry the ball 200 times. I'm sorry, that efficiency angle's stupid. Zamir White is not a good running back, but I'll talk about Aiden O'Connell later. At number 9, I've got Will Levis, and this is one of those picks I had to project a little bit out. Will Levis has a play style which is favorable to the modern NFL. He takes shots downfield, he escapes out of the pocket, he can run a little bit on his own. He was in a horrible system last year. His offensive line stunk, his weapons were non-existent. Derrick Henry was waning, whether that be due to his age, his number of touches, his offensive line, whatever. The running game wasn't good, the passing game not special outside of him, and a defensive-minded coach in Vrabel. Now, much better situation, way better weapons. Calvin Ridley, massive improvement as a wide receiver 2, might even be the wide receiver 1 over D-Hop. Tyler Boyd, somewhat effective in the slot, getting up there in age, but I have a lot of faith in him that he can still be productive as that wide receiver 3. Was productive in Cincinnati last year. He was fully healthy. Tony Pollard, efficient running back. Can't give him that many touches, but what can you do? And they brought in Lloyd Cushenberry, and they have J.C. Latham solidifying the offensive line. The line is going to be much better in 2024. He's in a far better situation than he was last year. And he wasn't terrible last year. He had ups and downs, 3 good games, 4 or 5 bad ones. Comes to the territory. He's athletically gifted, seems like a nice dude, seems like he can lead an NFL offense if the offense is able to be led. I think he's going to be the 9th worst, and I've only praised him and said good things about his situation, because there are so many talented quarterbacks in the NFL, and it's still not a great offensive line. It's still not great weapons. It's just substantially better than where they were last year.
Well, you're being way too kind to him. He was not a good quarterback last year, and he mentioned all of the additions the Titans made on offense that will certainly, you hope, help to support Will Levis and him having a more successful year 2. But again, I think a lot of those additions are kind of being overrated by the Titans fan base. Calvin Ridley, I think, is wildly overpaid. I don't think he was all that great or lived up to expectations with the Jaguars last season. Tyler Boyd getting up there in age. D-Hop also still very productive, but getting up there in age. I'm not a big believer in their weapons as much as everyone else is. And at the end of the day, even if the receivers are better, he couldn't hit water if he was throwing the ball into the ocean last season.
Completely inaccurate. You did not watch the Dolphins game. You did not watch the Falcons game. You did not watch the Jaguars game, if that is how you feel about him.
You're right. He is very inaccurate because that's all we saw last season from him.
You are completely right about that. He is a good passer of the football. You are hating.
I have him closer to the bottom of my list, and someone who I routinely hate on or say negative things on is probably higher than a lot of other people have him. I have Russell Wilson and the Pittsburgh Steelers quarterback situation as the 9th worst in the NFL or 24th best, whichever way you want to look at it. At the end of the day, Steelers fans will try to convince themselves that Russell Wilson's stat line from last season indicates that he is a very good quarterback or can be an average quarterback in the NFL. That's just not the case, and I don't think they watched any Denver Broncos games. At the end of the day, he's much less athletic than he was earlier in his career. He takes too long to make a decision to throw the ball, runs himself into sacks, leading to negative plays, and doesn't elevate offenses at a high level anymore. When you take a look at how the Broncos won games last season with Russell Wilson, 5 of his 7 wins, he threw the ball less than 30 times, and most of his losses are when he was asked to pass the ball a bunch. So if Arthur Smith constructs the Steelers offense in a way where they're utilizing Jalen Warren and Najee Harris to kind of control the game and relying on their defense, yes, it can lead to wins, but if you ask Russell Wilson to throw the ball a lot, if Justin Fields is asked to throw the ball a ton, you're not going to be winning a lot of games in the modern NFL.
If Justin Fields is asked to throw the ball, you're not going to be winning any games in the modern NFL. I'll talk about the Steelers later. You are vastly overrating them. You are being too kind to our friends up there in Pittsburgh. We must hate them more. At number 8, I've got Jaden Daniels. And of the rookie quarterbacks who is going to find themselves starting day one, which is really just him and Caleb Williams, he is in by far the worst spot. New coaching staff, somewhat substandard offensive line. The weapons are all right, but not as good as any other team in their division besides the Giants, who we'll get to them later. But if he was only a pocket passer, I'd have him down at the bottom of this list. He can escape the pocket, he can run around, and he can create plays with his legs downfield, which sounds a little bit weird, but he's got the speed to quickly wind up in a cornerback or a safety's lap once the pocket breaks down or once a running lane is opened out of the pocket by his offensive line. That paired with Cliff Kingsbury, who is a good offensive coordinator, not a good head coach by any means, but can run an offense. Those two things together mean I think he is going to be productive as a rookie this year. Now, is he going to be good? Great. No. Is he going to be in the Offensive Rookie of the Year conversation? I don't think so. But he is not going to be dreadful. He's not going to lose Washington a ton of games. He may even win them a few. But I think there's going to be too much of an adjustment and too many learning pains for him to be a good quarterback year one. Not going to be bad, though, just not that great.
That's exactly how I feel about him. And unfortunately for him, he falls in this category because rookie quarterbacks, to a large degree, are a massive unknown. Whether it be Drake May, who at this point likely won't be starting, or Caleb Williams, we're doing a whole lot of projection where we feel, or what we feel like their production is going to look like in their rookie season. And the only way I could see Jaden Daniels being worse than the 8th worst quarterback in the NFL, if that's the language we're going to use, is if the mistakes he made in college show up in a major way in the NFL. If he's just running into hits down the field, letting linebackers take his head off, not sliding, not stepping out of bounds, that's where we could see him potentially get injured really early, and we could see a lot of turnovers come from those poor decision-making.
If he does that, if he has not learned how to slide between the end of last season and now, I'm moving him up to number 1 because he's going to get his head taken off by Dexter Lawrence week 4. That is the biggest issue. That is the thing which will hold him back. You're absolutely right on that. Anyway, you have at 8.
That is who I have at 8.
That is who you have at 8.
Yes.
Look at that.
Do you want me to take it away with 7? Or
No. We don't need to hear any more from you. At number 7, I've got Sam Darnold. And the beauty of Sam Darnold, he is a known and an unknown commodity at the same time. Terrible with the Jets. Terrible his first year with the Panthers. His second year, in a limited capacity in 6 starts, 4-2 as a starter. Completion percentage wasn't great, but that's because he was throwing deep to DJ Moore, it felt like every single play. And with the 49ers, we saw him start 1 game with the backups in. He is a somewhat unknown commodity because no quarterback could succeed in that Jet system, and no quarterback could succeed in that Panther system. He's physically talented, big arm, can run better than a lot of people give him credit for, but he is a slow processor of the game. He's not going to be able to stand up to blitz as well. He's not going to be able to read secondaries at an elite level. If he was in another bad situation, he'd be down near the bottom of this list. But he's going to be behind 2 elite tackles. He's got some of the best weapons in the league. He can throw to, hand the ball off to, check the ball down to, and he's got a great offensive-minded head coach. That is going to elevate Sam Darnold. He is not going to go out there and lose the Minnesota Vikings games. He's not going to be a Joshua Dobbs or a Nick Mullins who shoots his team in the foot, has 4 interception games, and is a net negative to the team. He is not going to elevate them by any means, but he is going to keep the ship above water. He is going to bail water out and make sure they're hanging around 500, maybe slightly below, maybe slightly above. Put the ball in the playmakers' hands. Let them make the plays instead of him. That is what he is going to do. But there are so many good quarterbacks in the NFL where just being a guy who gets the ball into people's hands isn't enough. That's why he's down here at 7.
Well, just because he may be a little bit better than Nick Mullins or Joshua Dobbs, that doesn't mean he's not one of the 5 worst starting quarterbacks in the NFL heading into 2024. I think you're being a little bit generous with his ranking. I'll expand upon my opinions on Sam Darnold because I have him closer to being the worst quarterback in the NFL. And my 7th worst quarterback in the NFL is Deshaun Watson. Now, a lot of Browns fans are optimistic because he went 5-1 as a starter last season. We saw marginal improvement from him from a statistical perspective. 13 more passing yards than he did last season. 61% completion percentage compared to 58% completion percentage. And he facilitated the Browns offense. Browns fans, they would say he won us games. We went 5-1 with him as a starter. One of those games, unfortunately, he only threw 5 passes, completed 1, was an interception, and a 1-point win against the Colts. Really went 4-1 as a starter. And when you take a look closer at those games that he won last year, 3 of those wins were because his defense allowed 6 total points over the course of those games. 1 was a 0-point goose egg, 1 was another 3-point game, and another 3-point game. So he did not have to do a lot of work in the Browns offense in order for him to win games last year when he was even healthy. And at this point in his career, he can't stay healthy. He's coming off a torn labrum, I think it was a torn labrum, to his throwing shoulder. Either way, injury to his throwing arm. How is he going to recover from that? It is impossible to know. We will have to see once he finally takes the field. So I don't have high expectations for him this year. I think my ranking is still relying a lot on the fact you hope he can be 40% of what he was the last time he shined on the Texans and threw for 33 touchdowns and had a 70% completion percentage. We've never seen anything close to that with his time on the Browns, but I have him as the 7th worst in the NFL.
Yeah, I got him at 6. It's for me the same reasons you talked about. The 5-1 record fools absolutely no one if they actually went and watched the games. Nick Chubb is coming off a massive knee injury. Their running game is going to be diminished in his return. Even if he bounces back and is 90%, they're still going to be passing the ball more, taking the ball out of his hands to keep him healthy. And Deshaun Watson passing the ball more is a recipe for failure for the Browns. He had 8 touchdowns last year, threw for 4 picks, had 5 fumbles. Not an efficient quarterback, did not throw the ball downfield often. When he did, it often resulted in a turnover. He is not a good quarterback. He will go out and lose the Browns games. There are many other backups I would rather have than Deshaun Watson starting. Plain and simple. Anyway, who is your number 5? Or who is your number 6?
My number 6, Daniel Jones.
You have Daniel Jones at 6.
He's a bad quarterback.
Pitiful.
He's a very bad quarterback. He's now had 2 seasons cut short over his last 3 where he has not looked good. He is not an elite passer of the football by any stretch of the imagination. When your best season and one that your fans used to support you to give you another chance, you only have 15 passing touchdowns and 5 interceptions. That is not a phenomenal year to be an elite quarterback or better than the worst 6 quarterbacks in the NFL for that matter. The only reason I have him coming in at the 6th worst versus top 5 or top 3 worst is I think he offers more from a rushing perspective than the guys I have lower than him on this list that I have in my top 5 worst quarterbacks, and that is the only thing saving him right now. I'm questionable what he'll look like this season because he is coming off of that major knee injury and he may look like the worst quarterback over the first 3 games. But, I mean, we're talking about 6th worst.
You're vastly overrating Daniel Jones, putting him at 6th overall. I want you to know that. This is homerism talking. You must be accurate with these rankings. Come on.
Says the one who has Sam Darnold at 7.
I would much rather have Sam Darnold as my quarterback than Daniel Jones. Leaving aside the contract, if you want to talk contracts, dear God, Daniel
I didn't
Jones,
even mention
Daniel
contracts.
Jones would be in the negatives if we're talking about contracts and what he brings to a team. He is pitiful. At number 5, I've got Russell Wilson, and here's the thing: you put him at 9. He's in an active quarterback battle with Justin Fields. That tells me all I need to know. There is something going wrong with Russ. The throw power, not there as much anymore. The athleticism, the ability to get out of the pocket, he tries to do it, still not what he once was as a young man in Seattle. It didn't work at all in the Broncos. Sean Payton likes a methodical offensive system where his quarterback sits down in the pocket and hits his receivers. Keeps the game on schedule. Maybe Matt Canada changes things, but I imagine that is the style of offense the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Arthur Smith.
Thank you. Arthur Smith. The Pittsburgh Steelers, with a dominant defense and 2 functional running backs, 2 solid running backs, want to try and play. They've invested in their O-line in the draft the past 2 seasons. They want to run the ball. They want to make a 2nd and short, a 3rd and even shorter, or maybe even a 1st down on the ground. They want checkdowns to be thrown. They want their quarterback to get the ball out in 2.5 seconds or less. Russ does not do that. Russ is not going to be able to play within the system the Pittsburgh Steelers want. And because of that, he is going to look terrible at points, and he may even get benched for Justin Fields. Mike Tomlin is going to lose his mind when Russ takes a 2nd and 4, which Najee Harris effectively picked up 6 yards on 1st down and turns that into a 3rd and 12 or a 3rd and 15 because he ran outside the pocket and got sacked instead of just throwing a check down. Things are not going to go well for Russ in Pittsburgh. I have almost no faith in him. It'd be worse if it was Justin Fields starting, but things are going to be bad for Russell Wilson.
I think, I've voiced my opinion on Russell Wilson, but I think your hate for Justin Fields is a little bit overblown. I would still have Justin Fields as the 9th worst quarterback in the NFL. Maybe I'd
Justin Fields, who cannot pass the ball at the NFL level, who is only good at throwing the ball deep to DJ Moore, who can't run an NFL offense. If you put him in the Steelers system, many of the same issues I just expressed for Russ would affect him as well. He will not complete passes over the middle. He will not have timing, precision with his throws, and he'll take dumb, unnecessary sacks and turn 2nd and manageables into 3rd and forevers.
But when you compare him between the two, and if you're the Steelers building an offense that's more predicated on the run game, and you have one option who may have much more NFL experience and much more success in the league as a passer, which would be Russell Wilson, but he's kind of lost some of that magic due to a decrease decrease in athleticism. Maybe some of that is arm strength leading to more sacks and an inability to extend the play. And you have another option who's one of the 3 most dynamic rushing threats in the NFL, has ran for 1,000 yards in a season as a quarterback, and has shown that while he maybe is not a Patrick Mahomes level processor or top 15,
he's one of the 2 worst passers in football. Stop trying to sugarcoat that. He can't throw the ball.
He completed 64% of his passes last year and had 16 touchdowns and I think 9 interceptions. That's not horrific.
Did you watch any Bears games? They're parading in the streets that he is gone. It wouldn't matter if they were replacing him with Tyson Bagent. They would rather have Tyson Bagent as their starter than Justin Fields this year. You are delusional if you don't think he was terrible. Dear God, man, you did not give up on the hype. Like, let it go. I know you were picking him to be your dark horse MVP last offseason, but come on now. We need to be serious. We need to move on.
You're just making things up.
He's not a good passer of the football. He's a bad passer of the football.
I didn't say he was good.
We can't sit here and pretend it.
If we're talking,
don't put him in the same conversation. Oh, he's not a Patrick Mahomes level processor. He's not a Jackson Mahomes level processor.
Yeah, but that was coming off the heels of me saying he's one of the most elite rushing threats in the NFL. So
are you even an elite rushing threat anymore if you can't generate any pressure?
Listen, I know we lack critical thinking skills on that side of the room.
I get that.
But when we're
if
talking,
you think Justin Fields is a starting quarterback, dear God, if you think
we're
he's
talking
not
about the bottom 10 starting quarterbacks in the NFL. Nowhere did I say he's a top 10 quarterback. And if I was saying he's a good passer, he would be much higher than the 10th worst quarterback, the 9th worst quarterback in the NFL. With that being said, my 5th worst starting quarterback in the NFL is Jacoby Brissett with the New England Patriots. There's a reason he's been on 4 different teams over the last 4 seasons. He's not a starting caliber quarterback. He's someone that if he's starting 2 games for you, you're not too worried because he's pretty accurate. He's somewhat mobile. He can read the defense at a fairly well level. But at the end of the day, if he's your starting quarterback over the course of an entire 16-game season or an 8-game stretch, you're in trouble and you're probably not going to win a lot of those games. So on a Patriots team that does not have a lot of talent, I don't expect him to be special, but I also don't expect him to be the worst starting quarterback in the NFL.
You'd be surprised. He's closer to that than you think. We've now entered the part of the list where I don't think you can win with these quarterbacks. Russ, you can get by with Russ. Deshaun Watson, you can get by with Deshaun Watson and win games if you've got an elite supporting cast. Down here onward, number 4 through number 1, it's going to be rough. I don't think you'll be a above 500 team or even close to it. My number 4 is Aiden O'Connell. And it's pretty simply because I don't think he's a starting quarterback in the NFL. I think he's got a slow release. I think he's not particularly athletically gifted. I might be able to run a faster 40 than him right now. He processes the field at an all right level, but a lot of that comes to his elite weapons getting open. His weapons got worse this offseason, in my opinion, unless you have a lot of faith in the tight end they drafted. The running game's going to be non-existent without Josh Jacobs. He's probably, I'd say, one of the 5 worst in the pocket passers in the entire NFL, and that's not something you really want from a guy who's an archetypical pocket passer. Doesn't read a defense at an NFL level, and his upside is being a high IQ career backup. He was an old rookie last season. There's limited room for growth and improvement. I think Gardner Minshew will eventually take over this starting job, but the reason they call it Minshew Magic is because Gardner Minshew is like a street magician. It's very impressive when you watch him for a few weeks, say, oh, wow, cool card trick. How'd you know I was going to have the 10 of diamonds? Once you figure out the tricks, which every NFL defense always does, you figure out he likes running out of the pocket in certain ways, the routes his receivers run to get open, it's pretty easy to stop him. There's a reason the Colts tapered off down the stretch and the Jaguars were never that successful with him as a starter. That being said, he's my 4th worst. These are not good quarterbacks. They are not going to lead the Raiders offense to any success. Any success they do have is going to be a product of the talent around them and the weak defenses they play, like Aiden O'Connell played the final 4 weeks of the season.
Well, the reason I have them ranked better on my list versus some of the other guys is that I am trusting their floor. I think they don't have as much bust potential as a Daniel Jones, as a Deshaun Watson, as a Russell Wilson, which led me to put them as the 10th worst starting quarterback in the NFL versus having him as one of the top 5 worst quarterbacks in the NFL.
You are greatly overestimating the floor of Aiden O'Connell. He is not going to start any fires in the team building. That's about his floor. He is not going to commit an act of domestic terrorism.
And my fourth worst quarterback in the NFL, and this one's probably going to get Isiah jacked up, I have Bryce Young. Nothing that Bryce Young showed us last season showed us that he is a very good starting quality quarterback in the NFL. 11 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, was not accurate, didn't really have any good games last season. And I understand that the situation he is in is miles better than what he had last year. Xavier Legette coming in at receiver, Deontay Johnson. They added a rookie running back in the draft. You hope the offensive line additions will be significantly better than the play he had to play behind last year, and I think he can be a productive starting quarterback in the NFL, but his arm strength did not exactly jump off the television at any of us, and he's still a short quarterback, not overly mobile compared to some of the other guys in the NFL, leading me to put him as the fourth worst. I'm assuming Isiah doesn't even have him in his top 10
Yeah,
worst.
why would I? I actually watched the games, unlike you, apparently, instead of being a box score. Look, there is so much wrong with Bryce Young at 4. It is putting no projection. It is paying no attention to the acquisitions of Dave Canales, the strengthening of the offensive line.
If I was more generous, maybe he'd be the seventh worst.
The worst case scenario for him is he puts up a stat line similar to what Geno Smith had last year with 3,500 yards, 20 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. That's the floor for Bryce Young if he's on the field. He has the elite arm talent still. You're delusional if you don't think he does. You didn't watch all those balls deep which bounced off his receiver's hands? He had one of the highest drop rates in the NFL for his targets, above a 5% drop rate. His production is limited because he had no supporting cast around him besides Chuba Hubbard. And I got a lot of respect for Chuba, but if he is your team's leading threat, you're in a bad spot. Adam Thielen has been bumped down from the number one target who was force-fed the ball 137 times to being a slot receiver this year. They got Xavier Legette. They got Deontay Johnson. They went out and got the most athletic tight end in the draft class. They got Jonathan Brooks, who is arguably the best running back in the draft class. They spent $150 million on the interior of their offensive line. The situation has completely changed. That alone should take a quarterback who had 2,800 yards, 11 touchdowns, 10 picks, to 3,500 yards, 20 touchdowns, with no projection of improvement from his play. You pair that with a Dave Canales system, who saved Geno Smith's career, and then the very next season saved Baker Mayfield's career, and it's insane to me that you can look at a talented player like Bryce Young and say, nope, not talented, not going to succeed. He was incredibly accurate. He has arm strength. It's preposterous. Like, I legitimately don't think you watched the games. I think you were just saying, David Tepper's his owner. He's not going to have any success. David Tepper's not going to be on the sideline calling plays.
You just compared his production to Geno Smith, who you have as one of the 10 worst quarterbacks in the NFL.
Yeah, because I think Geno Smith is going to be worse. I think Bryce Young is going to be way better.
Whatever. I don't really follow that logic path. I think you're being
What logic path do you follow to put him at 4?
I explained to you.
Aiden O'Connell above him. We got to stop talking quarterbacks, man. We got to do an offensive line ranking list. You are not coming to this table with a full deck of cards or with good intentions. Goodness. We'll get into bad intentions later, though. Go. To Bryce Young, that has me flustered.
Who's your fourth worst?
I already did my fourth worst. My third worst is Jacoby Brissett. And the thing with Jacoby, he is a sacrificial lamb. He is going out into the Patriots system so they don't have to start Drake May or Joe Milton. He is going to go suffer behind a bad offensive line with bad receivers with a new coaching staff. He is the stopgap. He is the guy we put out there to not ruin the development of the young guys we drafted. And he's going to produce like that. I don't think he's particularly accurate. He doesn't shoot you in the foot a ton, but he doesn't take risk. He's risk averse, which is not a good thing in this setting. Will not make aggressive throws on third down. Not good in the clutch. Not particularly athletic. Injury prone. There's a lot wrong with Jacoby Brissett. He's a good career backup. He will be paid tens of millions of dollars to back up starting quarterbacks in the NFL. But if you had him as your starter going into the season, you are in big, big trouble, which the Patriots pretty clearly are.
You already heard how I feel about Jacoby Brissett. We have very similar feelings. You just have him slightly worse than I do on my list. And a quarterback you mentioned already, you're much more optimistic for him. Will Levis is my third worst starting quarterback in the NFL heading into this season. I understand, I already stated that they added talent around him. But when you look at last year, he completed only 58% of his passes. There's some interception situations he avoided because his passes were so inaccurate. So I don't think he's in...
Yeah, they call that throwing the ball away.
Oh, if that's the argument you're going to make, fine. But he's not an elite passer in the NFL. Does he add some athleticism? Yes, but I don't think he's a quality or anything close to a good starting quarterback. And I don't know how much you even have to add to that.
Yeah, you're greatly underrating because you don't like the Titans and you have commented on their firing of Vrabel, which as time goes on, I started agreeing with more and more. It was time for him to go. They brought in a new offensive-minded head coach. They got the offensive coordinator from the Bengals and have him running the show. Will Levis is going to be a productive quarterback next year. I don't think there's many logical people who are disagreeing with that. Maybe the interceptions increase, but the touchdowns are going way up too. If he can stay on the field, he is going to have 4,000 yards with the amount of attempts he's going to have. May have 20 interceptions with those 4,000 yards, but the production is going to be there. He's not going to be, what'd you say, the third worst?
Third worst.
That's ridiculous. Come on now. Second worst, I've got Daniel Jones. And you put him at 6th. I almost put him at 1. I was this close to putting DJ at 1, but something stopped me. We'll get into that something later. Daniel Jones is a horrible quarterback. He is a horrible quarterback who is going to be athletically limited as a runner coming off a major lower body injury and who is going to have defenses keying in on him more than they ever have before. The New York Giants offense now plays for the Philadelphia Eagles. Saquon Barkley is gone. With that, the opposing teams are going to be able to put less men in the box, more guys outside, keying on the pass, unless, of course, you think Devin Singletary is going to be a dynamic threat, which defenses are quaking their boots to stop. The focus is going to be on Daniel Jones, and that is not a good thing. Negative touchdown to interception ratio, horrible pocket vision, sacked frequently. Part of that's on his offensive line, part of that's on him not knowing when to get rid of the ball or when to give up on a play. You're going to see him try and air the ball out to Malik Nabers. The problem is, he's not going to have time to let Malik Nabers develop routes, and he doesn't have the arm strength to consistently hit him deep. The Giants essentially wasted that pick this year. Nabers' production is going to be limited. He's going to be a 700-yard receiver as the number 1 option in the New York Giants offense. That's not good. Daniel Jones is the worst starting quarterback who I am sure will be the week 1 starter of any team in the league.
Thought he's the second worst.
Yeah, there's someone who is a bit shaky. He may not be starting week 1, but he's the worst confirmed week 1 starter. If anything, I'm going to circle back and talk about training camp footage. I know it doesn't matter. Everybody looks good in training camp. You're supposed to look great. It's a very rare case where a guy doesn't look special as a player in camp. Daniel Jones looks effing horrible in camp. He can't hit screen passes. He can't hit checkdowns. He can't hit slants. He is missing passes that you or I could make with our left hands. It's over. He's done. He's going to be cut after this year and will never have a starting job again because he's that bad of a passer.
I think you're overstating keying in on the Giants' passing game more all of a sudden, limiting his production, because I think the Giants have never had a receiving weapon since Odell left like Malik Nabers to threaten a defense in the way Malik Nabers is going to threaten the defense.
Also getting bullied in training camp by the Giants secondary, by the way. Or excuse me, the
Lions
secondary.
He's been bullying the Lions secondary.
You are out of your mind if you think he's been bullying the Lions secondary.
I think
he slapped someone in the head and then ran away and then got his neck rocked after he kept getting locked up by rookie cornerbacks.
He wasn't getting locked up.
He was getting locked up.
He was dismantling
He
them.
was locking them up. You are coping. You wish you had Odell
Misinformation.
2.0. You at best have Jarvis Landry 2.0, and that's being generous.
That's just pure hatred coming from that side of the room. Who, he's still a little.
Why would I hate the Giants? I got no issue with the
Vikings
Giants.
in the playoffs a couple years ago.
There are plenty of
13
teams who
team.
have beaten the Vikings in the playoffs. It's a fairly common thing. The Vikings have been around for a while. I've seen it happen before. I don't really hate the Saints that much.
Are you going to let me finish my rebuttal, or just going to keep cutting me
Are you
off?
going to keep calling me a hater? My
You are a
hating is
hater.
substantiated. I hate terrible quarterback play, which is why I hate Daniel Jones.
Can I finish? I think you're overstating that a little bit. I think there's an element to the Giants offense that'll be different from what we've seen at any point in Daniel Jones' career with Malik Nabers on the field this year. And what I think is, because of how good Saquon is being a slightly downplayed backfield situation. Now, the offensive line still has the potential to be horrible. And something I will agree with you on is if you think Daniel Jones' rushing production is going to be significantly worse and what he poses as from that standpoint, I can definitely see him being bottom 3 quarterback in the NFL next year if he doesn't offer anything as a rusher, which was his only saving grace at every other point in his career.
It's going to be rough in New York. I think the Giants may have the worst offense in football, and I think he's a big part of that. Not the only part, but a big part.
Now, the second worst quarterback in the NFL, and this is just for me from a talent perspective. Now, he will be productive in the offense in which he is playing, and we saw Nick Mullins and Joshua Dobbs have productive games last year for the Vikings. I mean, the two games where Nick Mullins threw for 400 yards, and I think Sam Darnold is better than Nick Mullins was. There's a reason Nick Mullins is not taking the starting job this year for the Vikings. He's not a starting quarterback. And when you take a look at what Sam Darnold has been over the last 3 years, his last 18 games as a starter, 17 passing touchdowns, 16 interceptions, a completion percentage that barely reaches 60%. He's a toolsy player. He can make some cool throws. He has some highlight plays that you'll see people throw up there to justify him getting another opportunity to be a starting quarterback in the NFL. But at the end of the day, he doesn't win at a high level. He doesn't complete passes at a high level. Isiah said it earlier, doesn't process at a high level. So do I think he'll have a productive year in the games that he is the Vikings starter? Yes. The Vikings have a whole lot of talent around him with a good offensive line and an excellent head coach, but I don't think when we're talking purely starting quarterback, I think he is the second worst in the NFL.
There is no point in trying to remove a quarterback from his situation and say, well, actually, he's going to be terrible. Sam Darnold is going to have, at the bare minimum,
you're going to be more productive when you have talent around you.
1,500 yards more than some of the other people we have talked about on this list. You say, oh, well, he's a bad quarterback, this, that, and the other. Doesn't matter. He can be as bad as he wants. If the production's there, you are never going to be labeled as terrible. You're certainly not going to be labeled as the second worst quarterback. If he throws for 3,500 yards, 20 touchdowns, and like 15 picks, is he still going to be the second worst quarterback? Would that placement be justified even though he had a fairly productive season because he's not talented, because he doesn't process well? You're getting too deep into the hypotheticals and the minutiae of things. But if we want to talk hypotheticals, I considered adding an extra player to this list so I can make the quarterback I'm about to talk about quarterback 0. That's how bad I think he's going to be. I think Bo Nix is going to be generationally terrible. Of every rookie quarterback who did not have a major off-the-field issue, he will be the worst when he winds up starting. And he will wind up starting at some point because Sean Payton is not rolling through an entire season or even a month with Jarrett Stidham or Zach Wilson as his starting quarterback. He's going to try and justify the pick. Justify using a first-round selection on a fifth-year senior with a troubling injury history who is incredibly raw, and it's going to fail. Bo Nix is not going to be able to function in a Sean Payton offense. Sean Payton does not rely on screens and excessively on checkdowns where receivers grade heavily after the catch. He would like his quarterbacks to be able to air the ball out. Bo Nix cannot air the ball out at the NFL level. He could barely air the ball out at a Pac-12 level. His production was the Oregon system, not the other way around. Oregon is going to be the best team in the country because they have massively upgraded a quarterback next year. He is going to be dreadful. He is going to get out-schemed. He is going to be able to process he's not going to be able to process at the NFL level. He is going to throw at least 20 interceptions if he starts more than 10 games, and he is going to get Sean Payton fired. Bo Nix will be the worst starter at any point. Backup, rookie, injury, whatever. This is for the entire season. He is going to be the worst, bar none. I don't think there's going to be a close second.
You say I'm drinking the haterade today.
Who's your number one then?
Well, it's Jarrett Stidham.
Oh, so the Broncos are going to have a bad starting quarterback.
And I like Bo Nix more than you do. I'm more optimistic for him. I think he has the potential to be a productive NFL quarterback. Do I think he's as talented from a physical perspective as maybe a Jaden Daniels or a Caleb Williams or even what Drake May has shown?
Even what Drake May has shown, Drake May is incredibly athletic.
You're getting hung up on the smallest words. With that being said, I think his floor is a bit higher than some of those guys, and I think much like Aiden O'Connell and other guys who may not have that super high athletic ceiling, he can be productive with the Broncos next year. Jarrett Stidham, on the other hand, who is likely, in my opinion, to be the Broncos starter for a couple reasons. I don't think Sean Payton is going to want Bo Nix to have his first start come on the road against what should be a good Colts team or come against a great Packers team in prime time in week 2. So if we see Bo Nix early in the season, I think it's going to come in week 3. And when it comes to saying how bad Jarrett Stidham is, there's a reason he's only started 4 games in his career. He's not a quality quarterback. If you need him to come in and play 1 game, he may have 1 productive game for you.
They had a good preseason game once or twice. You're discrediting the preseason production from 2 years ago.
The first game he stepped in 2 years ago, 365 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 picks, 108 quarterback rating. But he's forced to play another game. Horrible game after that. 1 touchdown, 1 pick, 76 quarterback rating. Just last year, played 2 games, 62% completion percentage, 1 touchdown, no picks. Follow that up with a touchdown and an interception. So he can be, quite solid in a spot start, but you ask him to do anything more than that, and he's horrific.
So what you're saying is essentially Sean Payton does not want Bo Nix to be the starter early in the year because it'd be going into 2 rough environments. So he's going to have Jarrett Stidham put in 2 spot starts.
Basically.
So Jarrett Stidham's going to have 2 games. Sean Payton is then going to bench him for Bo Nix, and then Bo Nix is going to stink it up for the rest of the season.
He's not going to stink it
up.
up. That's not what I said. You're putting words in my mouth.
I'm putting my words out there now. Bo Nix's ceiling is the basement. Bo Nix's floor is hell. You are not ready for what he is about to do to NFL defenses. Every team playing him is going to be the Legion of Boom, is going to be the 2000s Ravens, is going to be the 85 Bears defense. Remember last year when the Broncos gave up 70 points to the Dolphins? He is going to be the defensive equivalent of that for whatever team he plays. You don't hate Bo Nix enough. However much you hate him, you don't hate him enough. Anyway, those were our thoughts on the 10 worst quarterbacks in the NFL. Let us know what you think down in the comments below. Are we woefully mistaken about the Steelers? Is Russ going to be top 10? Is Justin Fields going to win the MVP somehow? Or is Bo Nix going to be the offensive rookie of the year? Your comments are appreciated. Like, share, and subscribe if you're still here, and we will see you next video.